And we're back now with the vice chairman of IBM, Gary Cohn, who also served as the White House economic advisor in President Trump's first term. Gary, welcome back. It's expected the Fed's going to cut rates again this week, even though we did see in the economic data release that inflation is still high. President Trump said can't lower prices once they're high. Seems to be admitting that it's not within the president's remit to control what you spend at the grocery store.
Margaret, thanks for having me. You're right. So we had two bits of economic data this week. We had consumer prices and we had producer prices. Both came in on the high side of where economists were hoping. If you look at the consumer prices, we're looking at about 2.7% on consumer prices. Remember, the Fed's target for inflation is about 2%. Right. So we're running almost 1% high. Producer prices came in even higher than we were expecting. So we're not down to that target 2% where the Fed would like to get to. That said, the Fed is meeting next week. The Fed is highly viewed that the Fed will cut interest rates by 25 basis points next week. That means over the course of this year, they will have cut interest rates by 100 basis points. Now, as you look forward into next year, people had projected they would cut a lot more. I think we are seeing the rate of cuts slow down quite dramatically as people are starting to evaluate the economic data that we have.
So what does that mean in terms of the economy President Trump will be inheriting?
So the president's inheriting a very good economy, a very stable economy. We have real solid economic growth. We have real job growth. We have real wage growth. And I think some of the wage growth that we're seeing, we've seen a lot of these union contracts be renegotiated in the second half of this year. Mm-hmm. Those wages feed through the economy. They feed through as inflation. So the economy that the president's inheriting is quite strong. I think it will continue to stay quite strong. And in fact, the American consumer today, as well as corporate America, is quite excited about what the Trump administration is talking about. And the business environment is very positive. Corporate America is talking about a lot of expansion, a lot of capital expenditure for next year, about repatriating more jobs back to the United States, about building more factories in the United States, hiring more workers.
You think that'll actually happen?
I do think it's going to happen. So net, we are talking about a very positive business and cycle going forward into 2025.
Is the stock market really the best way to gauge it? You saw Mr. Trump at the stock exchange this past week.
Well, look, the stock market is one benchmark. It's an index, it's a benchmark. And remember, the stock market is an index. There's a huge diversity of what's going on in the stock market. There's some of the tech stocks at the high end that are performing very, very well. And there's some of the more traditional stocks in the middle of the market that are not performing as well.
We got to take a break and finish this conversation on the other side of it. Stay with us, Gary. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Face the Nation. We're continuing our conversation now with Gary Cohn. Gary, before the break, you were telling us the business world has high expectations for the Trump administration. One of the things that Donald Trump promised to do in his second term was lower the corporate tax rate. So you helped put together the tax plan that's expiring in part of it's expiring in 2025. He said at the New York Stock Exchange this week that he wants it to go down further from 21%. He really wanted to get it back down to 15%, and we will be able to do that. Will he be able to do that?
Look, Mark, we don't know. Look, the whole tax discussion is going to happen over the course of 2025.
Why did you do it in 2017?
In 2017, we did not have the financial wherewithal to do it.
Okay.
When you go through reconciliation, which is how they will do taxes this time in 2025, you are given instructions by the budget committee. And the instructions are basically how much money you can spend or how much revenue you could take in. This time it will be how much money you can spend. We did not have additional money to spend. So the lowest we could get the corporate tax rate at that time was the 21%. That's also the reason that the corporate tax part of the tax legislation 2017 expires the end of 2025. To score that piece of legislation, which in the financial requirements we were given by the Senate and the House finance committees, we had to end the personal side at the end of 2025. So we do know that taxes will be taken up by this Congress in this session. We know that they're going to have to deal with the personal side of the equation, because if not, the personal side will revert back to the pre-2017 tax code. That was a very arduous, ugly tax code with much higher rates, with a lot more loopholes, a lot more deductions. I don't think anyone wants, on either side of the aisle, wants to go back to the prior tax code. You know, when we open up tax code, even if we're just talking about the personal side, the corporate side will come into play. And there's always this interesting relationship between the personal side and the corporate side, because the vast majority of companies in the United States are small businesses that file on a tax return that allows them to pay the personal rate, but there's a difference between the personal rate and the corporate rate. And you want to make sure that those relationships don't get too far out of the line with each other, so people aren't incentivized to change their corporate structure to become a subchapter S corporation versus a corporation, so they can take advantage of the tax code. So there's always a lot of time spent there to make sure the personal rate and the corporate rate make sense in relationship to each other.
I think you've said in the past, though, you don't think the corporate rate should go down further.
Well, the business community as a whole, when we did tax reform in 2017, and whether you look at the Chamber of Commerce or you look at the Business Roundtable, you look at any of the business organizations, they were very supportive of a 21% tax rate. They, in fact, I think would have been happy with anything at 23% or below, which put us in line with other OECD countries around the world. It made us competitive. Other developed economies. Obviously, companies will be happier if the tax rate goes lower, but realistically, we just need, in this country, to be competitive with the rest of the world. We do not want corporate taxes to be a disadvantage for U.S. domiciled companies.
The pick for Treasury Secretary is hedge fund manager Scott Bessent. You may know him. He says he's going to deliver on the Trump tax cut pledges, but that's eliminating taxes on tips, Social Security, overtime pay. Can he actually deliver on any of that?
Look, Scott is quite an accomplished individual. So, look, I know he will put a lot of effort into this. He will have a lot of help with other people. Kevin Hassett, who's going into my old job at the NEC, will have an important seat at the table. Kevin understands a lot of these policies. There will be a lot of opinions at the table when we get to tax writing. You know, the House and the Senate will have their opinions. Remember, there are members of the House that ran on one item and one item only. They ran on the idea that we should bring back the state and local tax deduction, the SALT deduction. There were also members that ran on being deficit hawks. There were Republicans that ran on thinking that we have built up too much deficit and we need to get our budget under control. We're going to have to find a way.
They're not going to like any of these promises.
I agree with that, but we're going to have to find a way to balance all of these needs and get to a tax plan that makes sense, but allows us to continue to drive our economy, continue to drive the economic growth, and continue to drive wages and jobs.
Well, you heard the House Speaker say some of this may be done through reconciliation, which implies that the Senate isn't going to seek a majority vote. They're just going to try to put this through with 51 votes and do it in kind of an arcane way. When is this going to happen? And should it happen before they fix the border?
Well, it sounds like, from what I'm hearing, and like, I don't know, this could change anyway. There's other people smarter than I deciding on the strategy on this. It sounds like there may be two reconciliation bills. It sounds like the first reconciliation bill, which you're right, is a bill that allows the Senate to do something in a simple majority, budget-related only. You can only reconcile a budget-related with a simple majority. It sounds like there may be a first reconciliation bill, which is border-related, where they may take back much of the unspent Inflation Reduction Act money and some of the other money that was appropriated under the Biden administration and use that to close the border.
And then they'll get to taxes.
Use a second reconciliation bill, because there are two budgets out there, as there were in the Biden administration. Use that to go after taxes and fixing taxes, especially the personal side of taxes, that ends in 2025.
That's a big fight to have in the year ahead. Gary, we'll be talking to you again then. We got to take a break.
Thank you.
And we're joined now by the Ukrainian ambassador to the United States, Oksana Markarova. Good to have you back with us.
Thank you for having me, and blessed Sunday to all.
No Western power, as you know, is sending troops to Ukraine to help Ukrainian forces. But Russia's got North Korean troops now who are fighting on their side. Yesterday, President Zelensky said Russia has been using a significant number of North Koreans. How are they fighting?
Yes, so and we are not asking for other troops. Ukrainians are still capable of defending our own country. We're asking for the military support. Yesterday, we have seen those tens of thousands of troops that we were warning the world about. We have seen hundreds of them on the battlefield already. And we are successfully fighting with them as we are fighting with the Russians. I mean, look, we see them now in Kursk Oblast only. And our brave defenders were not only able to kill a lot of them, but also keep the positions. So it's difficult, of course, to see the reinforcement from this axis of evil, but it will not change anything for us. We will continue defending the very long line, whether it's in southern eastern Ukraine or whether it's our defensive operation in Kursk.
And in the meantime, the North Korean troops are getting trained in modern warfare, and they're learning in Ukraine, I mean, right there.
Absolutely. And we also have to worry about what is it that Russia is promising or even delivering to North Korea in exchange for this, and Korean missiles.
But I also raise the manpower issue because it's a problem for Ukraine as well. Military recruitment is tough right now in Ukraine. There has been pressure on your government by the United States to lower the draft age so that you can boost the number of fighters. This is arguably a bigger issue than the weaponry itself. Is it affecting the ability of Ukraine to keep up this fight?
I wouldn't agree that it's a bigger issue than the equipment itself. We still have, first of all, we have a number of young people fighting for Ukraine, and they are volunteering, and women are volunteering. Ukraine is one of the countries that lifted all restrictions for women, for example, and we have 60,000 of women in the armed forces. With the recruitment, the last changes to the law on mobilization already allowed us to create new brigades, which we are training now. And the problem is to have enough equipment to train them on so that we can actually not send to the battlefield like Russians do, right, unprepared, whether it's North Koreans or unprepared Russians, but to send soldiers who can do and deliver on a mission. And it's very important for us because every person matters for Ukrainians. Of course, there are challenges, and we have the plan and we know how to do it because, again, this is our home we are defending. So when it's necessary, all of us are going to be defending our country. But weapons and having more weapons, especially long range, especially something to counter these 3,000 glide bombs every month that Russians are sending against us. These missiles, both Russian and North Korean missiles. I mean, it's still a question of artillery and weapons and air defense, most importantly. And the more we can have, the faster we can, the more efficiently we can defend.
Well, the Biden administration has been releasing more weapons just in the last week alone. But Donald Trump gave an interview to Time magazine, and he said the United States is escalating by allowing for missiles to be shot into Russian territory. He specifically focused in on that. He does not like that Ukraine is doing it. What does that mean for you on day one of the Trump administration?
Well, let me start by saying thank you to all American people, really, for standing with us all this time. Let me thank President Biden and his administration for all the support. Let me thank President Trump. He is the one who made a historic decision to provide us with javelins, actually to provide us with lethal aid in the first place.
Back in 2017.
Yes. So right now, we have to do everything in order to stop Russia. And we know it could be stopped. It was recently stopped in Syria. We liberated more than 50% that they have taken. We actually kicked them out from the Black Sea just with our own naval drone capabilities. We can stop them. The more equipment we have, especially including the longer range equipment, in order to be able to degrade the attack capabilities faster, the faster they will either come to the table, because again, Ukraine wants peace. Nobody wants peace more than us. Ukraine was never a problem. We never initiated this conflict, and we negotiated at the first sites. Remember in 2022 when Russians started negotiations, they of course did not negotiate peace, they negotiated the pause.
Right.
As we just heard Congressman Waltz, who absolutely rightfully said, it has to be peace, not a pause.
He was careful. He didn't give a lot of specifics as to what the Trump policy will be, but we do know that Viktor Orban was at Mar-a-Lago this past week, and he talks to Vladimir Putin, and he's talking about a Christmas pause. Do you see a chance for a Christmas ceasefire and prisoner exchange?
This is very difficult winter. After Russia destroyed a lot of our energy infrastructure, and after, we are going through these difficult fights, both on the front line, but also civilians suffering from the deadly missile attacks.
Just this past week?
Yes. At the same time, every time Russia is talking about some ceasefire, they are lying. Russians are lying. And we see they were not able to defend their terrorist body Assad, and he fled to Russia. And we see horrible atrocities in Sednaya prison, like we see in Ukraine everywhere. It reminded me isolation prison in Donetsk, which still is operational. So, look, if Russia wants seriously to stop it, they can stop it anytime.
Okay. Ambassador, I have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
We'll be back in a moment. Scenes of jubilation in Damascus as thousands of Syrians mark the first Friday prayer since the fall of the Assad regime 1 week ago. Our Elizabeth Palmer has more.
I have never seen Damascus so filled with joy. Bashar al-Assad, the dictator, had fled to Moscow. And just like that, the fear of saying something that might get you arrested was gone. The Islamist fighters who'd seized power a week ago were partying too. In the main souk, shoppers walked on Assad's face, while at Sednaya prison, where his critics were tortured and killed, crowds poured into what Syrians used to call the slaughterhouse. It's some kind of maybe underground holding cells. This is where political prisoners were disappeared. Horrible. Dark, damp, smelly, cold. All week, families combed the cells for clues that might tell them what happened to their husbands, their fathers, their sons. In a house near Damascus, we met an American, Travis Timmerman, who'd entered Syria illegally and been locked up in an Assad jail since May.
You got more than you bargained for, maybe. Huh. Well, I'm here. Yeah.
He is a lucky man. As soon as the regime fell, local people set him and the rest of prisoners free. At the ancient Umayyad mosque, the fighters' leader Abu Muhammad al-Jolani was welcomed a conquering hero. He's changed his look from the old days when he was affiliated with al-Qaeda, and a master of modern messaging he posted on X, too, inviting all Syrians to join in rebuilding the country. His inner circle has promised elections in March, but not everyone buys it. Rumors are spreading like wildfire that no matter what they say, these men mean to rule like al-Qaeda 2.0. Syrians are afraid, especially the Christian and Alawite minorities, that when the dust settles, they'll find that a new tyranny has simply replaced the old.
That's Elizabeth Palmer in Damascus. We spoke with the executive director of the UN's World Food Program, Cindy McCain, last week, and began by asking about the situation in Syria and how her organization is getting food to those who need it most.
Well, our deliveries so far have been very smooth, but we need more delivery options open, which is what this was alluding to. More importantly, we have been able to get 70,000 people fed this month so far, but we need more. And more importantly, we need the funds to do it. That's where we're lacking. You know, WP never left Syria. We've always been in there, but now we need more routes, more ability to get in and to get not just more trucks, but more people in so that we can help in the best way we can.
The U.S. still has some sanctions on Syria, but they do let in UN humanitarian aid. There was a call in Congress, a bipartisan one this week, for the United States to lift some sanctions. Are you experiencing U.S. sanctions getting in your way at this point?
Not really. We've been able to, as you said, we've been able to move our goods through, our food items, et cetera, through, and get it to where it needs to go in a safe and a quick manner as well. But I will never underestimate the process with things that it could infringe us later on. So I'm hoping that things stay calm, that we can move our goods again in a safe and secure manner and do it at full scale. If we can't work at scale, we can't feed.
And you said you're short on funds. How much do you need?
Oh, worldwide, I could use 17 billion right now, if you want to know the truth. There's so many countries that have absolutely no access to any funding. No one's paying any attention to it.
So why did you say funding is down? People are just not paying attention?
Yeah, countries are rerouting their funding in different ways. They're choosing to fund things in different manners or not to fund at all. And I'm asking on your show worldwide to please consider once again giving to Syria, because people in Syria will starve to death without it. And we've seen the evidence of great hunger there.
You know, you and I have spoken in the past on this program about the U.S. contributing so generously to the UN, the largest funder, arguably the most important partner to the United Nations. And you had encouraged Beijing to really kind of step up their game. And you had said there was somewhat of a lack of willingness to be a part of working together as a team worldwide. Have you seen any change to that?
Not much. I encourage all countries to get involved, including China. We need help from everybody. The world is on fire right now, and hunger is at the forefront of all of this. And most importantly, when people are hungry, this becomes a national security issue. And so it affects not only the countries that it's affecting, but it affects us worldwide. And it does affect national security. So it's important that every country worldwide get involved and be involved in this.
So I want to ask you about Sudan. I know you were recently there. It's in the midst of a brutal civil war. The U.S. has accused both sides of ethnic cleansing. Can you keep trucks going into Sudan to feed people there?
Oh, it's such a complicated situation. Right now we have 30-some convoys on the road going into Sudan to hit the various places that we need to get to. But we need more. Certainly Darfur has been a big issue, but we have other parts of the country that are just as needy, and where famine does exist. As you know, it's been declared there. And we need also to be able to come through Khartoum and make sure that we can access from that direction as well. It's been a slow process, but we have been able to get in, but we need more. Again, food security is national security. Don't ever forget that, because if people are insecure from a food reality, they're not going to behave well, and they start to migrate. Wars begin that way. Conflict is a part of all of this.
I'd be remiss to not ask you about what's going on in Gaza. Jake Sullivan, President Biden's national security advisor, said this week the U.S. has stood up to Prime Minister Netanyahu to say, let's make sure that Israel is not responsible for the third famine of the 21st century. Are we at famine in Gaza?
We're very close to it. We've seen the effects of it. We've seen what's going on. Listen, we're in the month of November. WFP has been able to get 2 trucks in. That's all. 2 trucks in the month of November. And of course now we're into December. This whole issue of not being able to get in is unseemly. We need unfettered access. We need a ceasefire, and we need it now. We can no longer sit by and just allow these people to starve to death. We need help, and we need to make sure that we put political pressure on those that need to have political pressure put on them.
We've seen images of crowds just crushing people, amassing at bakeries in Gaza. 90% of the population cannot return to their homes. They're displaced. Only 4 bakeries are operational for nearly 2 million people. This is man-made.
It is man-made. You're absolutely right. It is man-made. And more importantly, the world needs to take a hard look at this and realize that not just do they need food, but we need access. And the targeting of humanitarian aid workers is unconscionable. We need to get in and do our job. And more importantly in all of this, make sure that we can feed. Children especially are starving to death. I mean, the height of malnutrition, the height of hunger within that region is unbelievably horrible. And so we've seen it firsthand, and I, as the leader of the largest humanitarian aid agency in the world, I'm calling for a ceasefire, and I want my fellow partners within this arena to call for the same thing.
Understood. You use the word targeted. Who's targeting your workers?
Well, there's lots of things that are going on. There's gangs that are running. If we're speaking directly about Gaza, it's gangs that's running around. It's the lawlessness.
Director McCain, I know you have a lot of need. You're looking for $17 billion is the number you are asking for. We wish you good luck with feeding the world.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We'll be right back. That's it for us today. Thank you for watching. Until next week, for Face the Nation, I'm Margaret Brennan.